The Loaded Pause, a speech to the Conservative Members' Committee on Foreign Affairs, March 1936.
For 400 years, the foreign policy of England has been to oppose the strongest, most aggressive, most dominating power on the continent, and particularly to prevent the Low Countries falling into the hands of such a power. Viewed in the light of history, these 4 centuries of consistent purpose, amid so many changes of name and fact, of circumstances and conditions, must rank as one of the most remarkable episodes which the records of any race, nation, state, or people can show. We observe that the policy of England takes no account of which nation it is that seeks the overlordship of Europe. The question is not whether it is Spain or the French monarchy or the French Empire or the German Empire or the Hitler regime. It has nothing to do with rulers or nations. It is concerned solely with whoever is the strongest or the potentially dominating tyrant. Therefore, we should not be afraid of being accused of being pro-French or anti-German. If the circumstances were reversed, we could equally be pro-German and anti-French. It is a law of public policy which we are following, and not a mere expedient dictated by accidental circumstances, or likes and dislikes, or any other sentiment. The question therefore arises, which is today the power in Europe, which is the strongest, and which seeks in a dangerous and oppressive sense to dominate? Today, for this year, probably for part of 1937, the French army is the strongest in Europe. But no one is afraid of France. Everyone knows that France wants to be let alone, and that with her it is only a case of self-preservation. Everyone knows that the French are peaceful and overhung by fear. They are at once brave, resolute, peace-loving, and weighed down by anxiety. They are a liberal nation with free parliamentary institutions. Germany, on the other hand, fears no one. She is arming in a manner which has never been seen in German history. She is led by a handful of triumphant desperadoes. The money is running short. Discontents are arising beneath these despotic rulers. Very soon they will have to choose, on the one hand, between economic and financial collapse or internal upheaval, and on the other, a war which could have no other object, and which, if successful, can have no other result than a Germanized Europe under Nazi control. Therefore, it seems to me that all the old conditions present themselves again, and that our national salvation depends upon our gathering once again all the forces of Europe to contain, to restrain, and if necessary, to frustrate German domination. For believe me, if any of those...
Winston Churchill's speech continued.
First, we ought to count our effective association with France. That does not mean that we should develop a needlessly hostile mood against Germany. It is a part of our duty and our interest to keep the temperature low between these two countries. We shall not have any difficulty in this so far as France is concerned. Like us, they are a parliamentary democracy with tremendous inhibitions against war, and like us, under considerable drawbacks in preparing their defense. Therefore, I say we ought to regard our defensive association with France as fundamental. Everything else must be viewed in proper subordination, now that the times have become so sharp and perilous. Those who are possessed of a definite body of doctrine and of deeply rooted conviction upon it will be in a much better position to deal with the shifts and surprises of daily affairs than those who are merely taking short views and indulging their natural impulses as they are evoked by what they read from day to day. The first thing is to decide where you want to go. For myself, I am for the armed league of all nations, or as many as you can get, against the potential aggressor, with England and France at the core of it. Let us neglect nothing in our power to establish the great international framework. If that should prove to be beyond our strength, or if it breaks down through the weakness or wrongdoing of others, then at least let us make sure that England and France, the two surviving free, great countries of Europe, can together ride out any new storm that may blow, with good and reasonable hopes of once again going safely through.
We return to Chapter 12, the Second World War, the loaded pause.
On May the 28th, 1937, after King George VI had been crowned, Mr. Baldwin retired. His long public services were suitably rewarded by an earldom and the Garter. He departed in a glow of public gratitude and esteem. There was no doubt who his successor should be. Mr. Neville Chamberlain had, as Chancellor of the Exchequer, not only done the main work of the government for 5 years past, but was the ablest and most forceful minister, with high abilities and an historic name. I had described him a year earlier at Birmingham in Shakespeare's words as the pack horse in our great affairs, and he had accepted this description as a compliment. I had no expectation that he would wish to work with me, nor would he have been wise to do so at such a time. His ideas were far different from mine on the treatment of the dominant issues of the day. But I welcomed the accession to power of a live, competent executive figure. Our relations continued to be cool, easy, and polite, both in public and in private. Mr. Chamberlain made few changes in the government. He had had disagreements with Mr. Duff Cooper about War Office administration, and much surprised him by offering him advancement to the great key office of the Admiralty. I, in my turn, was astonished that Sir Samuel Hoare, who had just secured a large expansion of the naval program, should wish to leave the Admiralty for the Home Office. Hoare seems to have believed that prison reform in a broad humanitarian sense would become the prevailing topic in the immediate future, and since his family was connected with the famous Elizabeth Fry, he had a strong personal sentiment about it. I may here set down a comparative appreciation of these two prime ministers, Baldwin and Chamberlain, whom I had known so long and under whom I had served or was to serve. Stanley Baldwin was the wiser, more comprehending personality, but without detailed executive capacity. He was largely detached from foreign and military affairs. He knew little of Europe and disliked what he knew. He had a deep knowledge of British party politics and represented in a broad way some of the strengths and many of the infirmities of our island race. He had fought 5 general elections as leader of the Conservative Party and had won 3 of them. He had a genius for waiting upon events and an imperturbability under adverse criticism. He was singularly adroit in letting events work for him and capable of seizing the right moment when it came. He seemed to me to revive the impression history gives us of Sir Robert Walpole, without, of course, the 18th century corruption. And he was master of British politics for nearly as long. Neville Chamberlain, on the other hand, was alert, businesslike, opinionated, and self-confident in a very high degree. Unlike Baldwin, he conceived himself able to comprehend the whole field of Europe and indeed the world. Instead of a vague but nonetheless deeply seated intuition, we now had a narrow, sharp-edged efficiency within the limits of the policy in which he believed. Both as Chancellor of the Exchequer and as Prime Minister, he kept the tightest and most rigid control upon military expenditure. He was throughout this period the masterful opponent of all emergency measures. He had formed decided judgments about all the political figures of the day, both at home and abroad, and felt himself capable of dealing with them. His all-pervading hope was to go down to history as the great peacemaker, and for this he was prepared to strive continually in the teeth of fact and face great risks for himself and his country. Unhappily, he ran into tides, the force in which he could not measure, and met hurricanes from which he did not flinch, but with which he could not cope. In these closing years before the war, I should have found it easier to work with Baldwin, as I knew him, than with Chamberlain. but neither of them had any wish to work with me except in the last resort.